In this segment, I'm going to take a look at the Select and Reshape tool, and they're found here at the bottom of your workspace on the editing toolbar. So this is the Select tool, and this is the Reshape tool. Now we'll start with the Select tool, and to use the Select tool, you can click on an object to select it. And I can tell that this object is selected because it gets handles around it. And if I look a little bit more closely, so we'll just zoom in a little bit here, it also gets, when you select an object, it gets highlighted with a small pink outline, and that may not show really strongly with the red object that I have. But one thing that's of particular interest is if you turn Visualizer off, you can very easily see what object is selected because it becomes highlighted in that pink color. So for example, if I click on this rectangle, you can clearly see that I've selected that, or this circle is clearly selected. So that's one very important difference between having Visualizer turned on, where everything takes on a much more realistic appearance, and Visualizer turned off, where you have more of the sort of computer generated lines to look at for your stitches. But when you're selecting, it's much more apparent, I guess, which object is selected. Now, other than clicking on an object to select it, you can also click and drag a box to select an object. And in that case, any objects that are inside of the box I drag will become selected. So you can see I just selected 2 objects, and if I click and drag a bigger box, I can have more. So it becomes like a group of objects that you select. And whatever is not in your selection box does not become selected. So for example, if I click and drag a box here, and I've got these 3 rectangles are covered by my box, so those 3, but this bottom one with the motif fill in it is not selected, not fully surrounded by my selection box. And so when I let go right now, only the objects that were fully surrounded by the selection box become selected. You can also select by clicking on one object and then holding the Control key down on your keyboard and clicking on other objects to select them. And you can see what objects I have selected because they get a blue box around them in the Resequence window. You can also select objects by just clicking on them in the Resequence window, and you'll notice that those objects become the highlighted objects in your workspace. Now there are more ways to select objects, but those are the most basic ones, and we'll come back with a little bit more sort of editing techniques later on in the video. But for now, those are the simple ways to select objects. And so you can either click on an object, click and drag to drag a box, or use your resequencing toolbar to select objects just by clicking on them. So once you have an object selected, so for example I'll select this rectangle, if you choose the Reshape tool, several things are available now, and I'm just going to take a good close look at this rectangle. So we selected on the rectangle. First of all, I'll just select it again. So it's fully turned into the highlight color. And now when I choose Reshape, I get different options. So there's basically 3 different very important things here. And the most important is the stitch angle. So I can use this to change the angle of the background thread. And here I'll turn the Visualizer back on so you can easily see the thread, and how when I change that angle line, the thread changes to be on the exact line that I chose. And so you can put that angle line anywhere you want to, and that becomes the new stitch angle. Now also when you're in Reshape mode, you have a small green diamond, and that actually represents where this object will start sewing. The first stitch of the object can be placed wherever you want it to be. And this small red crosshair becomes the end point of this embroidery. So if I place this right here, then this fill will sew to this point, walk over to the other side, and sew back to finish at this point. If I place the little ending arrow over here, it will start at this area and it'll stitch all the way across to the opposite corner. So you can control where every object starts and finishes with the Reshape tool. and you also have access to the angle line. Now, one more thing that I can do when I'm in reshape mode is I can actually change the shape of my object. So this is a rectangle, so each corner has a node which could be selected and moved to create a new shape. I can actually add points. So for example, if I click on the line of the outline of the rectangle, it adds a new point. And if I move that point now, you can see that I've added a point to the shape. If I left click, I get a corner point on the shape. If I right click over top of the shape, I get a rounded point. And you can see that there's quite a difference. Now, another thing that you can do, if I touch on one of those corner points, and then I touch the space bar on my keyboard, it will change that point from a corner point to a rounded point. So you can change any of your points at any time from a corner or from a round to a corner or back. So that one is a curve point. If I hit the space bar, it becomes a corner point. Space bar again, curve point. Another thing that's worth noting, and maybe if I put these close together and zoom really closely, you'll be able to see it a little better. Corner points show up as squares. Curve points show up as circles. So that's the biggest difference. And corner points are actually yellow. Curve points are, looks like kind of a bluey green. So that's one way that you can tell the difference between those shape points. And so that's the reshape tool. Now, when I click on any shape, so if I select this embossed fill rectangle, then I choose the reshape tool. And that's where I can, again, change the stitch angle, change the starting point, change the exit point, and I can add points to the shape by just simply clicking on it. Or move the points that already exist to reshape that object to have any shape that I want. Reshaping a circle is slightly different than reshaping a rectangle. Specifically with the circle tool, it's designed so that when you choose reshape, you can't move the exit point. It automatically goes to the opposite side of your start point, and the same thing with the stitch angle. So for example, if I move the starting point of my circle down here, it'll change the stitch angle to be perpendicular across the shape from the start point, and the exit point will always be at the opposite side. So that's a little bit different from any of the other tools. The circle tool specifically works that way. Now, you can reshape it. There's only one shape node. It's right here, and it gives you, I guess there's two shape nodes. One for the width of it, and then another one for the height of it. So you can basically make any shape oval you want, and you can change the start point. And wherever it starts, the ending point will be on the opposite side, and the stitch angle will be directly across the center of that shape. So that's the circle tool, and it's slightly different than the rectangle tool, which you have more control over the start pointing and ending point and the different shape of the object. So yeah, that's the select tool and the reshape tool, specifically with the circle and square object types.